Hello, just doing the standard sound check to make sure you can hear me and you can see me. If you just pop a comment in the live chat just to let me know it's all working okay, and I'll see you at past. See you in a bit. Hello, welcome to In Studio Live, the 72nd edition. Tonight we're talking high dynamic range, and it looks like we've got an elite group tonight. Numbers are a little bit on the low side tonight, but hopefully people will join us as we get underway on that. And talking of getting underway, let's do just that. And press the right buttons in and see what happens. Yeah, if you are a regular of this live stream, you watch it week in, week out and haven't subscribed yet, why not? Yeah, please subscribe if you find the live stream helpful. Please like and please use the YouTube share button, because that will help tell YouTube that this is something worth sharing out. The numbers have gone up a little bit. We're up to 13, so that's a little bit better. I was starting to get worried. I was starting to get lonely. Yeah, do join my Facebook group. The link is down below if you're not already a member. That's where we carry on the conversation. And I also have a newsletter, again, linked down below. Yeah, it's an interactive live stream, so I do rely on you being here and talking to me. Otherwise, I feel very silly talking to an empty studio and there not being any comments coming back in the chat. So please say hi in there. It's good to see the regulars: Bob, Paul, Terry, Tony, and Peter in there. And oh, the numbers are going down again. I don't know what's going on with the numbers tonight. I know sometimes YouTube does get a little bit upset. Oh, hi Astrid, waving at me in the chat. Great to see you aboard. Right. Okay. Oh, back up again. I don't know what's going on with the counts anymore. I sometimes despair with YouTube. Right, okay, so what have we got on the show tonight? Well, it's all about HDR, high dynamic range photography. And I've got various things connected with that. I'm going to explain what dynamic range is for anyone who's not totally familiar with that. I know I have covered it on here before, but I think it's worth going over it again because it really sets the scene for the rest of it. We're going to look at bracketing, and I'm going to give you some advice about how to do that, how to get the best out of it on there. I've got some tutorials on it, particularly a Lightroom tutorial, and wait for it, an Affinity Photo tutorial. I know some of you have been asking for me to do some of the tutorials in Affinity. Well, tonight is the first one. So we'll see how that one goes, see how that's received on there. I've got a new challenge in the before and after challenge, a new exercise, I should say, in the before and after challenge for you, which kind of links in with the high dynamic range. It vaguely does on that. And of course, at the end, I will reveal this week's member photo of the week. So do stay tuned to the very end to get that. Right, I'm going to do things a little bit differently tonight. I normally do the Facebook image feedback right at the end. Well, I'm switching it up this time, and I'm doing it first. So if you're one of those people who tunes in late because you can't wait, you'll join when the Facebook feedback is at the end to see when I talk about your images. Well, I'm doing it early, you've missed it. So for the rest of us, let me head over into Lightroom and find the images. Yep, here we are, Facebook images. So let's go through these. Yeah, I've not got that many to look at, but worth going through. Right, okay, here we have, I'm going to go full screen so you can see it, an image from John Barton. It's a crop of a seagull dancing on a railing. Quite like this. Nice to have the horizon low down at the bottom on there. A little bit plugged up on the shadows. I don't know whether we can we can bring anything back on that while still preserving the oranges on there. Might be possible by then. Oh no, that's the saturation. I want the saturation up, the luminance down on those oranges, just to try and help that a little bit. Let's have a look before, after. The alternative, he says, resetting all of that, is to go the other way, and that would be to bring the dark point down so it becomes much more of a silhouette of the bird with it. I think I'd just like to see it one or the other on there. I quite like the silhouette on that. So it's whatever you want to make of it on that one, John. And the other thing, John asked a question and posted a couple of Facebook images. He'd been doing some those 360-degree panoramas, and when he downloaded the image, this is how it came out, whereas when he displayed it on his iPad, it came out like that, and he was asking about how and why. I think it's down to the display software on that, because normally I would expect the actual file to look something like we see here, and then the software to interpret it into something like this. Now, the thing is, if you want it to look like this, you want to process it to look like that, it's actually pretty easy to do. I have done a tutorial on this in the past. If you search for the live stream about tiny planets, you'll find it in there. But very quickly, I've gone over into Photoshop, and let me show you how you would do it. So here we are, we're in Photoshop with the image. It needs a little bit of work on the shadows, to be honest, so I'm just going to do a very quick thing. First of all, unlock the background, edit, and adjustments, curves. So let's just boost that up a little bit, bring that down a bit. So we've got something like that with it. That will do on there. Next thing I'm going to do is I want to cut some of the ground out, because that will, whilst it's accurate, for what I'm about to do with it, it's going to create a really weird effect. So let's just crop that, and I'm going to crop it up to about there. On that, say okay. Next thing I need to do is I need to make this into a square image, but I need to do it by compressing everything. The easiest way to do that is image size on here, and if I look at the sizes on there, if I take the height on that and make sure that it's not linked on there, so take that off, put that into there, and say okay, we get that squashed into a square like that. Then we need to just flip that over, so edit, transform 180 degrees like that. Then it's filter, distort, and polar coordinates, and we want rectangular to polar on there, and we say okay, and we have got our little planet of trees. So with this I can now crop again just to bring the whole thing in like that. On there, and that is approximately how you would do it manually to create that effect in post-production. That's how you do it certainly in Photoshop. I don't know, I'm sure there's a way to do it in Affinity Photo as well, but that's the way in Photoshop for it. So File, save as, planet. Okay, and exit on that. So that's the John's version. You've just seen mine. So let's move on. Mickey again sent me a few images from Venice. Interesting one here. Interesting that it's deserted and it's clearly not first thing in the morning from the size of the shadows. I think this is one where I know Mickey has his. I know you have your own idea of things. I don't think Mickey was too impressed with my removing of all the haze in the images I looked at last week. So my apologies for that. This is just really showing an alternative way, my style on your images. I would be probably tempted to warm this very slightly and probably just bring the shadows up a little bit on there. Maybe bring those highlights down. I want to try and preserve the sky up there. And again, one way of doing that is the dreaded dehaze slider. We'll just bring a bit more detail into the sky. So that's the sort of thing I would do with it. Obviously, it's your image, your choices with that. But those are my settings. A slight tweak to the exposure, highlights down, shadows up, and vibrance. The vibrance up a little bit and dehaze up. Before and after. Before, after. Again, it's down to personal preference as to what you prefer. Sonia, another cracking image of a castle, one of the German castles. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, Sonia, you've used sky replacement on this, I think, because there appears to be a weird edge around the trees. It's only just visible at this resolution, but that would stick out like a sore thumb at 1:1. And the scale of the clouds doesn't look right for the distance that they are with this. Now, this is one where you're on a hiding to nothing with me on this. I used to work for the Met Office, so I actually spent 3 months in their residential college studying clouds, and I would be amazed if those clouds are genuine from that photo. Please let me know, Sonia, whether I'm wrong, but I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that those aren't the clouds from when that image was taken on there. But whether anybody else would spot it, if I'm right, I don't know. If I'm wrong, then you get some weird weather in Germany. That's all I can say. So, Tim, okay, thank you for submitting an image to the group. I hope you watch this. This is a recent image. It's tagged it as Formby Beach. When I saw it, I immediately thought it was just down the road from there where the Gormley statues are, but no, the beach further down at Formby, rather than. Mine's gone blank. I've photographed there so many times. Yeah. Anyway, the next beach down. Like the black and white conversion on there. Love the fact you've managed to keep the all the detail in the sky on that. It's just a lovely image. If I had a nitpick for it, and it really is only a nitpick, is I don't like the fact that we've only just got the top of the fence down here. I'd like to see the whole of that fence there, the bottom of it. I think that would improve it. But other than that, it's a nice image on there. Well done, and thank you for submitting it. So next, another one of Andy's Venice images. This one, I'm going to go into the develop module because I want to zoom in. Now, I think there's a problem with this image, and To me, this is an image about the two gondoliers. It's about them, but the focus point has been here on the end of the gondola, which means they're slightly out of focus. Look how sharp the gondola is and how soft they are on that. So I would just watch your focusing with this, Mickey. You just need to be. I would use a focus recompose or something like back button focusing, so you can choose exactly where your focus is and then compose the image on there. And I think that this would be a much stronger image if they were in focus rather than the end of the gondola being in focus on that. Torolid, I really hope I'm pronouncing your name right. This one, I think, is an overexposed image. It's not helped by the compression on there. Can you see the blockiness in that? But if I move the exposure down, I can only do so much. I think we need to be somewhere around here with it on there. The blacks are a bit plugged up as well on this. I think it's to do. It's been heavily compressed. Some of that's to do with Facebook, some of it's to do with the processing, and it's not doing the image any favours on there. It's a nice shot. We've got plugged up blacks and washed out highlights, and I think that's a processing problem rather than, or a Facebook compression problem rather than anything else on there. So that's it, but nice scenic other than that. And another one, nice one from Mickey in Venice. I'm going to take the highlight clipping off there. I do like this, and it's a shame the background's overexposed, but I do like her in the bright red with everything else in grey. It really draws the attention to her, and I think it is one where you can get away with having her in the middle as well with that. I mean, because I like my quirky angles, I'd also be wondering about, I don't want to lose the bridge. Could I do it that? Yeah, I don't know. No. With that, I was wondering whether there was a Dutch angle, a quirky angle with that or not. But no, nice image on there. White balance, does it require a white balance to fix all that grey? I don't know. If we went that much, I'd pull it back slightly. It's a different image, but maybe that white balance correction in there. So before, after. I quite like the grey with it, but it's your image, your choice on there. I just want to show you some possibilities with that. Love the panorama, John. Like the fact that it's balanced either side of the tower on there. Trouble is, it's underexposed, so we just need to just bring it up, protect the highlights by bringing those down on there, and that's the before and after. So just think about those sort of corrections with it on there. Astrid. Hello, Astrid. I like this. I really like the idea of a flower made of feathers. The fact that you've got your focus on there at that point really works. There is this issue of the line across there and the black above and the rest of the thing being grey down there. Is it possible to make the rest of the background black? I haven't tried this yet. It may be possible to do it. And one way to do it, and this is a bit of a cheats way, I'm going to go with the gradient tool. I'm just going to reset everything at the moment, and I'm going to just put a gradient in that's actually off the bottom of the image, which means everything that applies to the whole image. So that means I can, if I want to, make all that area black. But of course that means we've lost the flower. So what I'm going to do, just so I can see what's going on with this, put an overlay on, and I'm going to go down to range mask. And I'm going to do it on colour. And I'm going to just use the dropper. And I am going to just, now I've got to get this the right way round. I think if I, now it's adding in rather than subtracting. Get rid of those. Right, so I need to mask that bit, that out. And now I bring it. Nope, that's not done it. So I bring that right down. I do the masking on there, take the overlay off. Right, okay, so that's getting it to a certain extent in there. I've been able to darken that and preserve the flower. Unfortunately, I'm struggling to preserve other parts of this based on colour. I can't do it on luminance because that wouldn't work. So colour's the only option I've got with this. So yeah, that's the sort of thing we would get by putting the black behind there. To be honest with you, I think I prefer the original, because if I make the background black, as I think it was Peter who suggested that, I lose the stem in there. I mean, I have done it, but I think that loss of the stem is a bit of an issue with it. Right, anyway, moving on with that. I think it's the final one from Ruskin, one of the Indian birds. I said this last time, Ruskin, I'd love to see the higher resolution versions of your images. Please think about emailing them through to me to feedback@ians-studio.co.uk because I can give you some better feedback than I can with these very low resolution ones which get compressed by Facebook, but really like it. Thanks for submitting it on there. So, right. So let's head back and have a look at the chat, I think. So what's been going on in the chat? Just Astrid saying hi. Hi again, Astrid. Right, okay, let's have a look what's going on in where we're at with the slides. Those are the Facebook ones. I normally give preference to those which are emailed to me. The reason I haven't today is because some of the feedback relates to things I'm going to be talking about earlier in the thing. So let's move on to dynamic range and HDR. I think it's important to understand dynamic range before we look at high dynamic range and what we mean by that. So I did a talk a few weeks ago to a camera club, and this is just a very, very short extract from it. The full video, which is 3/4 of an hour, all on night photography, is going live for my Academy members only, hopefully this week if I get the chance to do it. So let me just play that video in for you, which explains all about dynamic range. So, dynamic range, what is it? Well, it's a term you've probably heard about, and some of you may not have fully understood what it's all about. Basically, dynamic range is the number of stops. Now, stops are units of light, as far as photographers are concerned, and so it's the number of units of light that the camera can see at any one time. And just to give you a bit of a comparison, the human eye is really, really good at seeing different ranges of brightnesses. And the human eye can see at least 14 stops at any one time, and that will go up to a massive 24 stops if we take into account the opening and closing of the iris and the use of visual purple. That's the chemical that the brain causes to be come into the eye to allow you to see better in the dark, and that's why it takes time for the eye to get used to dark scenes. So what about cameras? How many stops can they see? Well, in the old film days, we used to work on the principle of just 5 stops. That's 5 compared to the 14 to 24 that we as humans can see. A digital camera, well, a lot of the companies these days are claiming up to 12 stops. I'm not entirely convinced by that, because certainly by the time you've processed it and you've crunched it down into a JPEG and things like that, I don't think it's anywhere near that, but that's a personal opinion on there. So I think it's realistically somewhere between 5 and 12 is what your camera can see at the moment. Now, how does this work? Right, I'm going to go through a little slide here to try and explain how dynamic range and these range of brightnesses work with a camera. Let's just assume this dark over on the, it's very difficult to do this on the green screen. I normally walk up and down this slide. Actually, does it work with the mouse? Yeah, the very dark bit over here, all the way up to the really bright section over here. The human eye can see most of that. Let's assume that's what the eye can see of those brightnesses. The camera, on the other hand, sees a lot less. It can see just a small section of it. So from dark grey to light grey, it translates that as completely black to completely bright on there, to white. And anything either side of that, it represents as black, anything darker, and anything whiter, anything brighter, it represents as white. Now, because we've got control of the exposure on our cameras, we can choose which section of that whole range of brightnesses we want the camera to capture. We can get it to capture the brighter bits, but it still converts it to from black to white. But this time, what it sees as as black is now almost a light grey up to white, which it sees as it translates as white. And of course, as before, anything either side, it translates into all black or all white. Now, we could go the other way, and the camera could look at these darker areas. And again, it goes from black through to white, and anything either side, it translates into black or white. So let's just summarize what's gone on here. This mid-grey tone, let's take that as an example value. We see it as mid-grey. If we leave the camera to its own devices, it will also see it as mid-grey. But we can change our exposure so that it gets recorded as black, or we could change the exposure for that mid-grey to be displayed as white. So the question is, have I just proved that black is white? Anyway, that's the concept of dynamic range, that we have a limited range of brightnesses that we can capture. How does that work out in practice? Well, this image is a really good example of the restrictions of dynamic range. It's behind the scenes in a play that I was in, and when I was in the wings there, I was about to go on stage, but I had my camera with me. I got this shot of one of my fellow actresses. Now, I could see quite clearly the flats behind her. And the detail on there, it was the backing of the flats, we weren't on stage. I could see all the detail of her candle that she was holding. But the camera, on the other hand, couldn't. I had to choose my exposure, and I decided that probably for my own safety, as the scene that we were about to act out, she gets to hit me, that if I'd exposed for the candle rather than her face, she might hit me a little bit harder than the stage hit that she's supposed to do. I decided that I'm best exposing for her face on there. But the camera, because the dynamic range was so wide, meant that the detail in the background was lost and the detail in the candle was lost. That's the problem of dynamic range. And we'll see as we go on how that affects our night photography and how we have to work with that limitation to make night photography work. So that was the talk I gave to a camera club. It was all about night photography, that talk, but the dynamic range section that I've just brought out is important to us. Now, you can see the fact we've got those restricted areas, so high dynamic range is how we get round that restriction of the standard dynamic range. So, moving on with our slides, bracketing is the way we work round it. And what that is, it's taking multiple exposures for different points. Now, if you remember on that slide, I had the camera seeing the mid, set for the mid, for the shadows, and for the highlights. We got 3 images, all of which would be different. High dynamic range is all about combining those 3 images or multiple images together to create one image that works. Bracketing itself comes from the film days when you couldn't see on the back of the camera. So the idea of bracketing was, I'm not quite sure whether I've got the exposure right. Let's take a shot underexposed, overexposed, and I can choose between the 3. So that's where it comes from. But now it's almost exclusively to do with HDR. Right. How does bracketing work? Well, you get your exposure as to what you think is the correct exposure, and then you modify it by changing one of the 3 values, aperture, shutter, or ISO, shutter speed or ISO on there. And it must only be 1 for the bracketing to work. For HDR, it should be the shutter speed that you change. Don't change your aperture, because then you've got different depths of field with it, and ISO, you've got different levels of grain going on in there. But if you bracket by changing the shutter speed, you can then combine those images together to create your HDR shot. When you are bracketing, you need to make sure that all those images cover the whole set of exposures, from the darkest shadows through the midtones to the highlights, to capture all of them in there. Now, some cameras can do it automatically. You set it into auto bracketing mode. I think the Nikons have the ability, you even just press the shutter release once and it does all of them. With Canon, if you say take 3 shots as a bracket, you press the shutter release 3 times. The first one will do 0, then under, then over with that. So some can do it for you. Personally, I prefer to do it manually when I'm bracketing, particularly for HDR, because that allows me to confirm I've got all the brightnesses covered in the shot. I want to use this, I've shown you this image before, but I want to use this as an example of how I get the right range of images that I need. So the task here was to photograph the police station, and in particular the sign on there, because I was working for the company that had installed the sign. The range of brightnesses was huge on there, but the sign was the most important thing, so I got a shot to get that sign correctly exposed. And you can see that when the sign's correctly exposed, nothing else is. Everything else is in complete darkness. But that was the first thing. So This is why I say I prefer to do it manually, because I can choose. I look at the scene and it's like, right, that's my brightest item in there. Let's get a shot where that is correctly exposed, or even underexposed. And then I can go down in 1 or 2 stop steps until I know I've got everything in the shadows. So this is what I did with this, just going down 1 step, 1 stop at a time. And you can see I've not had to go far, and the sign's already overexposed, but I still haven't got much detail on anything else. And we keep going, and we keep going. And we're just starting to see some detail in the building there. And then finally on that, where I could look at it and think, yeah, I've got all the shadow detail now. So I now know I've got a full set of images which I can combine to create an HDR image. And that's the final image with them all combined and the verticals adjusted as well for it. So I want to give you some tips to do with bracketing when you have to do it. My first tip is put your camera on tripod if you can. Yes, you can probably do HDR handheld. I know of people who do, but if you really want to get an exposure for the darkest shadows, the chances are your shutter speed is going to be slow. There's a higher chance of it being a little bit blurred on it. So yeah, use a tripod if you can. And I've just seen, I'm assuming this is a slight delay on the thing, as I'm talking about tripods. I've just had in chat a question come up, do you need a tripod? Well, the answer is yes, and that's my answer to that, which I was answering before the question came in. And the other advice I have is if you're working on a lot of these sequences, sometimes you're going through, oh, is that the first one in the sequence? Is that the last one? The easiest thing to do is when you set up for your first shot, just put a finger in front of the lens, take the shot with one finger there, then obviously remove the finger, take the shot again, go through the sequence. So you've got your last one. After you've got the last one, do one more shot with 2 fingers in front of the lens, and you then know that everything between those 2 shots is a full sequence. It's just a very quick and easy way to isolate a sequence within a whole run of images that you're capturing on there. So now you know how to capture now you understand what HDR is and how you capture the basic images using bracketing. How do you combine them together? Well, you can do that in Lightroom. I'm going to show you how to do it in Lightroom. I'm going to show you how to do it in Affinity. So first of all, the Lightroom one, again, I've pre-recorded this, having had problems with Lightroom the other week, giving a live demo. I decided I would pre-record it. So here we go. In this video, I'm going to show you how to combine a number of images with different exposures together to create an HDR image. I've got 5 images here from the interior of St Dunstan's Basilica in Charlottetown in Canada. They're all at slightly different exposures. If I step through them, you can see. We've got a 1 second exposure, 0.6 of a second, half a second, third of a second, and 2 seconds. What we want to do is to combine all of those images together into a single HDR or high dynamic range image. And it's really easy to do it in Lightroom. We simply select all 5 images, right click on any one of them, and we look for the option Photo Merge HDR. This brings up a dialog box where it's creating the HDR preview. And in here we have a number of options. Auto align, I don't see any advantage of not having that selected. I created all mine on tripod, so they should already be auto align. But if there's been the slightest nudge or anything like that, keep that on there. Auto settings. This means that once you've combined them, Lightroom will attempt to do auto exposure on them. It's the same auto settings as you would use with any other image within Lightroom. You can still adjust afterwards. I tend to leave it on for HDR. It gives me a good basis and start point. And then amount of deghosting. Now, deghosting is where if you've got a moving subject in there, if I got a couple of people in there, it would look for where they are and try to avoid having those in there and remove those sort of ghost images in the image. I haven't got any on this, so I don't need to put them in. Create stack means it will stack all the images together with the HDR image as the topmost. So let's click merge. It takes a few moments to do that. We have the operations up in the top, and you can see it's already finished, and we have now an HDR image at the top of the stack. So I can click on these little double bars on the edge of them to expand or to contract. So let's go into this image and edit it. D to go into the develop module. We've got the image here. We can see some of the settings on here already. Let's zoom in on the area which was causing me problems, which was the stained glass window. And I can look here. If I show the highlight clipping, there's still a little bit clipped in there. So I can just pull down the highlights further and maybe just bring those whites down to keep everything from being blown out. I don't mind the odd little specular highlight such as that. So let's look at the rest of it. I've got most of the detail in the blacks and the shadows there. I'm just going to increase that a fraction more and maybe hint on the vibrance and a little bit on clarity. And I would say that exposure-wise, that's more or less it. So now the only other thing I need to do is to transform, and I'll go with auto. Let's see what that gives us. And that's not too bad. R to crop, and I can just crop in those white crop out those white areas on the side there. And there we have it. One HDR image made up of 5 different exposures. It's as easy as that to do it in Lightroom. Right, so that's the Lightroom method for doing it. Question came in chat from Tony, who was asking, are 3 shots sufficient? The answer is yes, if they cover all the range of brightnesses. For some subjects, you need more on there. And if you get them far enough apart, I like to have my shots relatively close together. I just find it gives me a better result on there. But yeah, you can work with 3. 5 is better. I've done as far as I think 9 before now, and that just, it depends on the subject really. You just need to make sure. That's why I say the way I work is I identify my brightest subject, get that, use my histogram, make sure I've got that captured, and then just keep going step by step by step down until I've got all the shadows in there and I know I've got everything then. And I rather than this idea of just either side of a midpoint, it's just the way I work on it. So moving on. Right, let me give the feedback on the images which were emailed in. And as ever, if you email your images to feedback@ians-studio.co.uk, I can give some better feedback on those. So let's head back over to Lightroom and I can talk about your images. So here we go. Right, I've got the wrong setup. Right, here we go. Right, okay. The first set that came in was from Sonia, which is a set of 3 images, and there's a problem with these. I'm going to go full screen and go full screen again. Now I'm hoping you can see this on the video, on the live stream. But if I zoom in on one of the deer here, this is the unedited raw file. Now we can see the image is slightly soft. There's a bit of grain in there, a bit of noise in it on there. So what Sonia did was to run it through the mine's gone blank, Topaz denoise, and you can see that's done a really good job on it, which is not bad on there, but she then ran it through Topaz Sharpen, and look what happened. When it's sharpened, she described it as an unnatural. I describe it as almost a painterly effect, particularly down in the foreground on it. And I think the cause of this problem is the fact that the algorithms are pretty aggressive, and I don't think they like working together. I think the better one on there is the sharpening on there. Once you try to do both, it's definitely an unnatural thing. If I go back to the original, and I'm going to see what I can do in Lightroom on this for exactly the same thing. So I go down to the Detail tab, and the noise reduction on here, I'm just going to whack up the color on there, bring the luminance noise reduction up, detail up, and a little bit on the contrast, which is nowhere near as good as the Topaz one on there, but we have got rid of most of the noise on it. If I hold Alt as I do it, we can see a little bit better what's going on with it. I'm just trying to bring it back as far as I can without getting the noise back. So I think that's about it. Now, in terms of sharpening here, again, hold the Alt key, and I'm going to bring the amount up quite a long way, and the radius up. And as I hold the Alt key, I can see the edge. So the amount basically says how much light and dark it adds to the areas of contrast, the edges that it finds. The radius is saying how far out it comes. If you can see as that moves out, white area on one side and the dark area on the other. Look at the back of the deer on there. We don't want it going too far. And the detail says how hard it looks for areas to sharpen. The more I bring it up, it's starting to sharpen the noise, so I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to go about here. And then you can see that it's now really quite noisy on there. The masking, I can bring that up to just try and sharpen those edges to something like that. Now we've got this noise in there, so I'm going to try bring that down a little bit and that down just a little bit. So nowhere near as good as the Topaz one, but we've got before and after. Before, after. Just that little bit. It's worked a little bit. Topaz version, Topaz denoise, compared to what I can do, is Topaz wins hands down, but the sharpening has had a weird effect. Now, I'm not a Topaz expert at all, but one thing I would suggest, Sonia, is try doing the two the other way around. Try doing the sharpening, then the denoise. See if that makes a difference. You've certainly done it the right way round. At least I'm assuming that's the way round you did it. But that's what's going on. It does create that weird effect. I'm hoping somebody like Gary, who's a big advocate of Topaz, I hope he's watching and might be able to offer a few suggestions on there. but I have to agree that looks really weird down in these areas. Very, very unnatural. What it's doing is it's sharpening a blur on there. The only other thing you could try is to do the sharpening just on the deer, then bring that into an unsharpened one as a different layer in Photoshop, and then just paint through so that you're not sharpening or denoising these areas that are starting to look a little bit weird. So that's my best suggestions on there. Right, okay. Next, Bob and his HDRs. Something interesting here. I have got all the images in there, and I've done a job on them myself. Now, this, if I go full screen, and that is Bob's HDR of this pumping station. Now, to my mind, there's a problem with this, and that is that window is still overexposed. If I go into the develop module and then enable the clippings, we can see we've got so much still overexposed, and those aren't due to Facebook compression because Bob sent those to me directly. So the HDR conversion hasn't quite worked. It should have done. I've had a go in here in Lightroom using the technique I've already showed you, and you can see the window's not overexposed, and we've not got as much plugged up blacks on there. And in fact, if I come down here, I can restore even more of the detail in that window with it without just something like that. And I think that is the difference I'd like to see with those. And that's true with the whole set that you sent me, Bob, that we've got these blown out areas and the plugged up blacks in them. Right, Paul sent me some wonderful abstracts, oil on various surfaces. I'm really liking these, the effect of it. I think the square crop also works well on that, Paul. Also trying oil on glass, I think it was that Paul as well, that set? Yeah, it was. The only thing I would say about these, that this looks as though we've got the colour balance wrong on it, and I would think something like that, and then bring the blacks down so that we get the true blacks on there. Maybe just ease that down slightly. I think it needs warming very slightly to something like that would be my thoughts on there, because that just looks like a horrible colour cast. Whether or not it's correct colour cast, I think something like that works better. And if I do the same with that one, again, I like that. Now, I don't know what you're using. It looks like some form of test card behind there for the droplets. But I do like the fact that you've got the lines on here. It really works well. I might be tempted with this just to tighten the crop just slightly on it to something like that, so that we've got the whole thing just going from the diagonals on there. Gary, who submitted this flower image, I think Gary did send me some information on how he created it, and I can't remember it. I'm sorry, but I really like the blurred effect on there. The fact we've got sharp in the middle. I'm not sure whether there's some form of HDR going on with it, whether there's some form of camera movement going on, or what with it, but I do like it. The only thing I'm not so keen on is the fact the flower is bang in the middle, and we've got this bright area up here. So I'm thinking that something like that might be a more interesting crop with it. Just taking it away from the center would be my suggestion on there. And that's the full set. So back over to the slides. Let's have a look what's going on in the nothing new in chat on there. And hello, are you all still there? Because my preview is showing black on here. There we go. That was it. Yeah. Right. Okay. I've just seen the chat on there. There's definitely something wrong with YouTube because my stats are all over the show on there. Let me go over to the chat display so you can see. Things suddenly all appeared. I had a blank screen in the corner. Right, let's pick up on some of these comments. Tony doesn't use Photoshop, found Photomatics Pro to be good for HDR. Yes, it is. I would concur on that. It's breaking the connection again. Let's see what I can do on it. Gary will turn the rate sharpening down for topaz and see if that works. Yeah, try that. And Paul was saying it's a test card suite they use for the background on there. And Gary saying his image Lens Baby. Yes, that was it. I'm familiar with Lens Baby. Don't own one, but that would explain the nice effect on there. It's a nice tool. The only reason I don't own one is I haven't yet worked out how I can justify it and get it to pay for itself. That's the only reason with it. Right. This is happening every week to me. I'm losing my stats. It suddenly signs me out in the middle of the live stream, which is bizarre. Right. Anyway, back to where I was. I will try and fix that in a moment. Let's just move on. As ever, the stream is sponsored by yourselves, and tonight's cuppa, and thank you to everyone who's purchased a cuppa for me as a means of keeping the live stream going. If you find these helpful, if you want to say thank you in a financial way, either join my academy, that would be my preference, but join the academy, or buy me a cuppa, and the link for both is down below and the cuppa one's on the screen. Tonight's cuppa has been brought to me by or purchased by Robin Cotton, so cheers Robin. Thank you very much. Right, the before and after challenge. I know we're quite a way into it now, but don't worry if you are behind or if you haven't started and want to have a go. Just do it at your own pace and whenever you want. Just work through the stages in order on there. And I hope you're still finding it useful on there. We've had, some slides missing. Right, let's have a look at your images. That's what my thing is telling me to do. Hopefully the other slides will turn up. So very quickly on last week's exercise, which was all to do with focal length, we had these images. This set was from Robin, and we can see the difference, how keeping the sign the same size, how that background changes both in terms of size and in terms of depth of field on there. And then Paul did it a sequence, actually did it twice with the building behind. And just watch here how that really affects the background and allows you to really isolate your subject from the background. So great for portraiture and that shallow depth of field. So those who are into localized sort of portraiture on location, you'll find that really useful technique on there. Now the other set is over on here, and Terry put them into a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll just go through his PowerPoint presentation to show his. So you can see 12mm. Now, as you're looking at this, just note the size of that door in the background. And as we move in on here, we can see that door appears to get larger and larger. Now we've lost it from the screen. So now look on the buttress, and that's getting in closer, closer. And just look at the difference that that's making to the shots. By just changing the lens. Now going up to 600mm, it's really taken the background out. It's isolated the subject, and going through this sort of exercise really shows you what you can, and you get a feel for what you can do with your equipment. Maybe you knew this but never really seen it, but by going through the exercise, you can get a real feel for what's possible with yours. And hopefully those of you who've done it, you'll try, though you'll think when you're doing those sort of shots, hey, oh yes, I can now do this because I know this lens gives me this effect on there. So we've had so far our before images. I've got you to do an exercise on composition, on freezing and blurring, on aperture and depth of field, on lenses and focal length last week, and this week, drum roll, it's all about night photography. So let's play the video for that. Hello, welcome to my 5th exercise in the before and after challenge. This week, it's all about night photography. Hello, I'm Ian Butterfield, and welcome to the 5th exercise in my before and after challenge. Tonight we're going to be photographing Stockport Town Hall, and the purpose of this exercise is to help you get used to the idea of when to do night photography. It's certainly not at sunset time. Sunset time was 5 minutes ago. I checked it on a website that I always use, timeanddate.com, and it said for Stockport, for today, it's 9 o'clock. Well, the sun has set, it's still plenty bright enough here. It's not a night shoot. The magic time to do it is about 20 minutes after sunset time. Why is that? Because we've got two forms of light here. We've got the artificial light that's lighting up the building, and we've got the fading daylight. And the aim is to find the time that balances the two. That will start tonight, about 20 past 9, just after 20 minutes after sunset time, and will last for about 20 minutes. So once we get to about 22:10, that sort of time, it'll be too late, and the sky won't look good in it. So let's get our first shot. I'm using ISO 100. I've turned image stabilization off. I'm set at f8. So all I need to do is focus and take the shot. And you can see that image is way too bright. It looks like a daylight shot. It's not the night image that we're trying to create. I need to wait till it gets to about 20 past. So I'll see you then. Okay, so it's now 20 past 9. This is the start of the magic 20 minutes for night shots. So let's take another image. And hopefully you can see on that image that it's starting to look a little bit more like a night shot, which is what we would expect. So I'm going to keep taking shots throughout the next 20 minutes. So the shot you've just seen was half a second. As the light decreases, then what we will see is the sky looking bluer. We will see the exposure's getting longer. I'm in aperture priority mode. We'll just see longer and longer exposures, so we'll start to see those light trails on there. One thing just to be aware of, as the light starts to fade, you may need to start using exposure compensation to enable the image to look dark enough. The camera is pretty good at trying to say, oh, I think this should be daylight, so it tends to put the brightnesses up a little bit. So you may need exposure compensation. So for example, for this shot, I've dialed in -2 stops exposure compensation, and you can see on there that now at halfway through our magic time, that the sky's starting to look blue, the building's looking good, and if I time this right for when there's cars going through, because I'm shooting at about a second, we're starting to get the light trails. So I'm going to carry on for another 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, and see what I can get. Now we're at 25 to 10, so we are 5 minutes before the end of that magic 20-minute window, and you can see now that the images are really taking on that nighttime look with that deep blue sky in there. Just waiting for a few cars to go by to get the light trails, because at the moment my shutter speed is about a second on there. Yeah, 1 second. What I can do, if I want longer light trails, I can change my aperture to a smaller aperture. So if I go up to from f8 to f22, that's going to give me an exposure of 8 seconds. So I just need to wait for the traffic to go by, and I should get those lovely light trails as I do. We're now coming up to the end of the 20-minute window. It's now just coming up to 22. I think I can still get a few shots after that. But one thing to note now, having stopped down to f22, I'm getting 13-second exposures, which means because I know my lens will be sharper at a wider aperture, about f8, f11, I can afford to open up just a little bit on that. So if I stop down to f16, it means I'm going to get a 6-second exposure, which should still be plenty long enough to get some light trails. So it's just coming up to 10 to 10 now, and the images I'm creating now, you can start to see that I'm losing detail in the shot. The very top of the town hall is disappearing into the dark sky, and so it's really just beyond the optimal time. So here's the exercise for this week. What I want you to do is to find a building that's illuminated at night, like Stockport Town Hall here, and arrive round about sunset time. So check that on the website timeanddate.com for your particular location, and arrive, take a couple of shots then, and then you will have to change the exposure using exposure compensation if you're shooting in aperture priority mode. Follow through, take a few shots before the magic 20 minutes, take shots every few minutes through the magic 25, so it might be every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes, something like that, and until you come out the other side, until your last image in the sequence should be when you've left it too late. And the purpose for doing this, it's so that you can really understand how to create those night shots, how that fading daylight really does affect the image, and how critical it is and how small a window it is for getting the perfect night shot. So as the alarms are going, let me get one final shot. And with that, folks, thanks for watching this exercise. I hope you found it useful. I look forward to seeing your night shots in the Facebook group this week, and until next time, thanks for watching and keep making great photos. Bye for now. Right, so that's this week's challenge, or this week's exercise for the before and after challenge. I look forward to your night shots, and again, do it as a sequence, same as we have with a lot of the others, and it's about really understanding, this time not the equipment, but the time when you need to shoot to get those images, and you'll see just how short that window is to actually get those shots on there. So anything new in the chat? We've just had one comment about finding the exercise helpful. So now, just before we finish, let me show you how you do an HDR in Affinity, my first Affinity Photo demonstration. Now, I've pre-recorded this because, well, I wasn't sure I would get it right first time. As it turned out, I did do a couple of takes on it, so it was the right thing to do. So let me play that in and see what you think. So here we are in Affinity, and we start off by going to the File menu, New HDR Merge. And with this dialog box, we can simply drag our images in here, or we can click Add. And I've got 6 images from the Macclesfield Forest, so I'm going to open those and automatically align images. Let's go through this dialog box. Automatically align. There's no reason not to have that selected. I'll leave it on perspective. I'm going to say remove ghosts. That's where you've got some movement between the images. It tries to reduce those by comparing the images. And noise reduction. There's 2 arguments here. You could do it, let the HDR merge do it, or you could do it yourself. I'm going to let it do just let it do 20% on there. I don't think I've got much noise that I need to resume. So with that, I can click OK. And it goes off and merges the images together. It takes a few minutes, a few seconds to do it, or a few minutes, depending on how powerful your machine is. So once it's done that, it goes into the HDR tone mapping screen on there. So that will pop up any moment now. Right, here we go. The tone map. And this is where we create the actual HDR look. Now there's 2 halves to it. We've got over on this side a series of presets. The defaults, I quite like the dramatic one, which makes it fairly contrasty and a sort of high clarity effect to it. If you want to do most of that work yourself, you might want to start with natural and then just work through the settings on the right hand side. With that, I'm going to use the dramatic as my preset. There are other presets available. If we pull down here, we've got some extreme ones, which basically push everything to the limits. And next is crazy, which goes beyond the limits. To be honest, I don't think there's anything in there that I'm ever likely to use on that. The only one I would get anything like would be the My Eyes See in HDR one, which is okay if you like that surreal look. The final set is the James Ritson Customs, and there's a whole load here that you can use. A lot of them are more sort of urban-y looking ones. For this, potentially Summer Glow on there, but I'm going to actually go with one of the defaults. I'm going to start off with dramatic and use that as the basis. At this point, we move over to the other side of the screen, over here, and we go through those settings. The various options up here, basically we've got the tone compression. If I just move that down, you can see it's less HDR looking, but we've got blown out highlights and things like that. So I want the full effect of that. The local contrast is really the difference between very natural looking and very surreal looking, and I like somewhere in the middle on that. Exposure allows us to change the exposure, lighten it up. We just need to be careful not to lose highlight detail in there. So I'm just going to take that back down a bit with it. The black point, as you can imagine, either crushes or expands the blacks with that. So I'm just going to go something about here. I want to try and keep as much detail as I can in the shadow areas. And the brightness just generally lightens the whole image up. But as it does so, we blow out the highlights. So again, we just need to be a little bit careful with something like that. Moving on down, we've got contrast. We can make it a bit more contrasty or less contrasty on that. So reset that to 0 because I'm not using it. Saturation, you can make it a bit more saturated. I think a little bit might help with it, or vibrance, you can bring it up that way. I'm just going to give it a touch of both on there. We've got the option to change the white balance, and maybe I'll just warm it up very slightly on that. Shadows and highlights. Now this is going to help me a little bit because I do want to try and bring out a bit more detail in those shadows with that. So I've just brought that up a fraction, and I'm just going to bring the highlights down very slightly to try and prevent the blowout on there. And I could do a little bit more on curves if I wanted to. Just highlight, bring up, and make this a little bit of an S-shaped curve to put a little bit of bite into it. So I've got something like that. Once I'm happy with that, I can then just go over and hit apply. That then takes us into the normal editing screen for Affinity Photo and allows us to refine this further if we want to. But this tutorial is only about HDR, so that's as far as I want to go with this. So at this point, I would do File and Save, and call it HDR Forest. And there we go. That is how you create an HDR image in Affinity Photo. So yeah, my very first Affinity tutorial. I know several of you have been asking for me to do some Affinity stuff. I'm still getting my head around it, so yeah, there'll be more to come over the coming weeks on that. Right, so this means we're more or less at the end. Yeah, I mentioned in the chat that this week there's 4 segments, including the before and after challenge segment, which are pre-recorded. Whether it felt any different to you or not, it's sometimes a little bit easier for me to pre-record stuff, particularly where I've got a section like the dynamic range where I'd already given that talk, so I was just able to chop that bit of the video out for it. The others just meant I could get through the demos a bit quicker on there. On that, so do let me know if you think that didn't work. Might be over the next couple of weeks I might need to do some pre-recorded stuff because of other commitments going on. Right, the member photo of the week. Drum roll, please. And this week's member of the photo is by Ruskin Savlar, one of his Indian birds. So I know Ruskin doesn't watch live, but he does tend to catch the next day. So thank you for the image, and this is how it will appear on the Facebook page. I've flipped it again so that it's looking in towards my logo on there. And thank you for that, Ruskin, and congratulations on having member photo of the week. So that, I think, just about takes us to the end. I'll change the image shortly. So thank you, everyone. Sorry it overran a little bit this week. If you've got any questions or anything you want me to cover on one of these live streams, email me to contact me at ians-studio.co.uk. Next Sunday, doing something a little bit different. I'm going to look at some of the lesser known camera settings and the importance of them and how they work. So I will demonstrate a lot of these. Well, it'll be on a Canon camera because that's what I've got, but I will try to pick ones which are applicable to different types of cameras. So even if you're a Nikon user, although when I talk about things like back button focusing, I'll talk about the whys, and even if I can't show you the exact menu for setting it for a Nikon, just to try and give you an idea about some of the things that your camera can do and you might not actually be aware of, or things that you might want to think about doing with your camera in terms of settings. So that's what I'm going to look at next Sunday, something just a little bit different. And so until then, thanks for watching, and as ever, just keep making great photos, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Right, here's the alternative ending for a cut down version. Thanks for watching this cut down version of In Studio Live. The full version is now in my Academy. We've just got highlights here on YouTube. So if you want to see the full version, then tune in each week for the live version, and or join the Academy where you can see the whole back catalogue and all of them there. It's only £6 a month or £60 a year, and that is a great way of supporting the live stream to keep me on air. So thanks for watching. Until next time, keep making great photos. Bye for now.